um, cases are tough.
Yeah. You know, sometimes they get appraisals that are way out of whack, and there's not much you can do other than try them. But just
Okay.
Let the minutes show that the executive session was adjourned at 5:17. The council has returned to the dais in the council chambers, and now we are back in open session. Moving on to item number 4 on the agenda. What are the wishes of the council? Carrie?
I'd like to make a motion to, Michaela, you ready?
I am.
Well, you can have notes. I think the city attorney has notes as well. Okay, for the city will purchase the Dockin property at the appraised value of $315,000. Second, the Dockins will be allowed to retain ownership and removal of the shop and shed from the property for a salvage value of $4,500 for the shop and $150 for the shed. It will be the Dockins' responsibility to move these. Dockins will waive any claim for the recovery of attorney fees or costs. The Dockins will have the right to the full use and enjoyment until closing, which will occur on or before August 9th, 2024. Until then, they are fully responsible for the repair, maintenance, utilities, taxes, and insurance on the property.
Second. We have a motion by Carrie, seconded by Paul. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion?
And Mayor, just as a point of clarification, Alderwoman Evans' motion is contemplating the 4 points that were articulated in correspondence from the Dockins Council, and it's dated August 3rd, 2023.
Okay. No further discussion. Please call the roll.
Evans? Yes. Janser?
Yes.
Olson? Yes. Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Burlingame?
Moving on to item number 5, I'll entertain a motion for adjourn. So moved. Moved by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Steph.
We will reconvene our regular meeting at 5:30. Our mic's on? Oh, there we go. I call to order the regular city council meeting for Monday, August 7th at 5:30. Please silence your cell phones or put them on vibrate to limit interruptions during the meeting. Moving on to item number 1 on the agenda, and that is the roll.
Burlingame,
Here.
Evans,
Here.
Janser,
Here?
Olson. Here. Pittner,
Here.
Padragula,
Here.
Ross.
Here. Let's move on to item number 2, and that is the Pledge of Allegiance. Moving on to the mayor's report since the last meeting's been relatively light, although we were just wrapping up the meat of the North Dakota State Fair, the record-breaking state fair. So congratulations to Renee and her team out there at the North Dakota State Fair for putting on a spectacular show. I did take part in the MSU Luau. We did have a proclamation. We all signed that proclamation as Renee Korslein Week. I presented that to her at the Friends of the Fair. Did take part in a 4-H leadership show. I got to learn how difficult it was to handle a goat for a showmanship competition. And then a couple other things that were on my schedule for the last week or so. Last Thursday, I took part in the Main Street or the Placemaking Summit was put on by the Commerce Department, North Dakota Department of Commerce. That was held at Minot State University, and also they did some touring downtown as well. Also spoke at the Global Leadership Summit, and that was held at the Pursuit Church. And also took part in and had some fun at the final for the Arts on Main Street. They had a great turnout, I think, and if Justin was here, boy, they did a great job this year on Main Street, and I really believe it's only going to get bigger and bigger. So I just want to remind everybody that this week is Farmers Market Week. We've got 2 wonderful farmers markets in town, and please take full advantage of those. Now is harvest time, so there should be plentiful for everybody to take advantage of those. And if there's any questions or comments, I would entertain them at this time. If not, we will move on to the city manager's report. Harold.
Mr. Mayor, Council, as always, the city manager's report and memo is included in the council packet and available on the website. I don't have it, since I'm the bulk of the presentation later in the meeting. All of our efforts have been working on preparing the budget, which we'll talk about later. So other than that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the council has regarding any other matters outlined in the memo.
Any questions of Harold? If not, we will move on to item number 5 on the agenda, and that is the city attorney's report.
Mayor, members of the council, I submitted a written report, and I can stand for any questions at this time.
Are there any questions of staff? If not, we will move on to item number 6 on the agenda, and that is consent items. We have 19 items on the consent agenda. I was asked to pull item 6.19. Is there anything else that needs to be pulled? Any other items that need to be pulled? If not, what are the wishes of the council?
Move approval on all remaining items.
Got a motion by Paul. Is there a second? Second. Second by Scott. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame, Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Motion is carried. Let's move on to 6.19. I was asked to pull that from Councilwoman Lisa Olson. So Lisa, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will make a motion to approve this item, but I have a little bit of an explanation. So maybe if there's a second, I can explain it. All right, so this item is a franchise agreement renewal. And in the past, these renewals have gone through the franchise committee. The franchise committee currently is made up of 5 aldermen. It would be Alderman Pittner as the chair, Alderwoman Evans, Alderman Padragula, Alderman Burlingame, and myself. But in this situation, staff did their due diligence and brought the recommendation to the council without the franchise committee meeting. It is my estimation that we're fine moving forward tonight because it is simply a committee of council members that make this approval. But I wanted to just make sure that it was known to the other committee members in case they wanted the franchise committee to meet prior to approving this item.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Nothing further? Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Bittner,
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Burlingame?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Let's move on to item number 7 on the agenda. That is action items. 7.1 MPO Policy Board alternate member. Lance, do you want to come up and address that? Or Harold? Or,
I can address it.
okay.
So at the recent policy board meeting, it was discussed by the board that it would probably be good for each entity to have an alternate appointed. So that way, if one of the appointees wasn't able to be at a meeting, that they could still be there and vote on behalf of the entity. So what we're looking for is the council to appoint an alternate separate from Alderwoman Olson, Alderman Janser, and myself, that there would be another representative of the city, that should one of the three of us not be able to attend one of the policy board meetings, that they could fill in and cast the third vote on behalf of the city.
Any thoughts or recommendations? Paul?
Does it have to be a council member? Can it be a staff member? Is there any staff members, to follow up on that, is there any staff members that will more than likely be in attendance at these meetings that could fill in that role?
Well, the challenge would be is that any staff that are continue to be involved will probably be involved at the TAC level, the Technical Advisory Committee. And we're trying to avoid duplication of having dual representation on both the Technical Advisory Committee and the Policy Board. Shouldn't happen often because hopefully the other three of us can attend on a regular basis. But at the end of the day, we prefer to keep that separation. So like Lance Meyer is the city engineer, would probably be involved at the TAC level. I don't know if we've included Mr. Sorensen or not. I don't know how involved he would be in that at that point. A little different scale of work than what he would normally be involved in. So it'd primarily be Lance, who would be represented on the Technical Advisory Committee.
Scott, did you have something?
So is the thought that the alternate would attend the meetings as a non-voting member to keep up to speed, or?
They could if they choose, but if the three original delegated, they would represent the votes, and the alternate would only be able to be counted as a vote if one of the other three were not there. But yes, the encouragement would be is that the alternate would be able to attend the meetings to be up to speed.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Any recommendations for an alternate?
What about the city clerk?
I might be taking minutes at those at some point, so.
This is Mark Janser speaking. Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Mark.
I was actually wondering if maybe the city attorney would be a choice.
From the look on her face?
I know, Mayor, members of the council, I don't know much about the MPO process, but I can certainly learn if you'd like to have me there.
Mr. Mayor?
Lisa?
I may give the city attorney a breath of relief and maybe suggest Brian Billingsley. Now he's sitting in the back sweating, but would there be a conflict, Mr. Billingsley?
Brian could potentially, because we're dealing with planning issues, and so he would understand that aspect. I'd also remind the council too that hopefully at some point here in the near future, we'll also have the assistant city manager filled, which would have oversight and should be very involved with these types of things as well. We just don't have the position filled yet.
Paul?
Just to follow up on that, would this position, if that were to be the choice going forward, once that position is filled, would it make sense? If we can replace whoever we do appoint, can we change that alternate at any point in time?
I believe it would just be a motion of the council to change who your designees are to that, and I think the council has the prerogative to do that at any time they see fit.
Ryan, do you have any objection?
Good afternoon, Mayor Ross and members of the council. Typically, policy board members are usually elected officials, where the technical committee members are usually city staff or engineers. So I would recommend that the board appoint somebody who's more closely related to city administration or an elected official to that position. I'd be more than happy to serve as a backup or alternate for the technical position if there is one.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay.
I'll offer to be alternate. We'll be here till like 7 o'clock. How about that person out in the hallway?
No, we don't need a vote on this then, do we? I mean, if.
I guess I'll make a motion to recommend Carrie Evans be the alternate.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Paul?
She offered, so that's why.
Motion, second, and a little bit of discussion. If not, call a roll.
Bittner,
Yes.
Quadrigula.
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans, Janser,
Yes.
Let's move on to item 7.2, and that is the 2024 preliminary budget and pay plan. At this time, I'll turn it over to our city manager, Harold Stewart. Harold, the mic is yours.
In just a minute, I just plugged in my laptop to pull up the PowerPoint presentation, so as soon as the system switches over so the public can view, I will begin the much anticipated budget presentation. Well, Mr. Mayor and Council, as outlined by city ordinance, I am required to present a city manager recommended budget to the city council as part of the budget process, which is what I will do here this evening. I will try to keep it as brief as I can. Hopefully my voice will hold out. I'm still battling a little bit of a cough. Hopefully I have enough cough drops here to help me through it if needed. So to begin, I just want to remind the council with regards to the updated city aspirations that you created with the help of a facilitator this last spring as we kicked off the budget process. There is a little bit of change here on the first one. This aspiration used to be titled Dynamic and Prosperous. And after some discussion of the council this spring, it was changed to Dynamic and Flourishing. And there's a couple of goals that are outlined underneath. The next of the 4 aspirations is Resilient and Prepared. And then we have Safe and Welcoming. And finally, Excellent and Connected. These slides will pop up as a couple reminders throughout the presentation, but I won't spend a lot of time dwelling on them at that point of the presentation. Just a reminder for the council and the public, after previous action of the council with some restructuring here, the creation of the assistant city manager position and the separation of the public works departments into 2 separate departments. This is now the new updated organizational chart for the organization. That will get in the 2024 budget. Overall, the 2024 budget is proposed to be just shy of $200 million, which is a representation of about 17 million more than the 2023 budget that was approved by council. The majority of this additional 17 million in spending is accounted for by NAWS projects, flood control projects, and the Puppy Dog Coulee stormwater project make up the vast majority of that $17 million of additional expenditures being proposed in this budget. This is a breakdown of where all the revenue comes from. We have multiple sources. Primarily today, though, I'm going to focus on property tax and sales tax, but there are many other revenue streams that make up the overarching budget of the city. So starting off, we'll talk about property taxes. This is a comparison of last year to this year. So the 2023 budget, we built that budget off of almost $2 million. The 2024 budget is proposed to be $28.7 million. While the number is a little bit larger, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is here in a minute, but the overall percentage of the budget that is paid for with property tax is actually decreasing in next year's proposed budget by about 0.5%. As is often the case, one of the major components of calculating property taxes is assessed values. I would remind the council and the public that by state law, the city assessor's office is required to have assessed values within 90 to 95% of the market value of properties. So we go through a process every year of assessing that and determine what that is. Based off of that, these are 2022 and 2023 numbers, but we saw an increase of almost $543 million from 2022 to 2023, basically meaning that some of it is based off of new construction, some of it is based off of just increased market value of properties within the city of Minot. I also tell the council that a good portion of that $543 million will come off because a large portion of that is the Trinity Hospital, which is taxable during construction, but now that it's in use and operation is now tax exempt. So a good portion of that $543 million will no longer be tax eligible now that the hospital is in operation. So we expect some of the 2024 assessed value to decrease based off of that. Moving on towards some of the general overview of expenditures by function from the general fund. It's pretty much into three major categories that money gets spent on, being public safety, highways and streets, and then just general government overall. And there's a breakdown in the amounts and the percentages that each of those represent, with almost 50% of that being public safety, or our police and fire department. We're going to talk a little bit about sales tax. Again, this is a reminder, we present this every year, but this is a breakdown of the 2 cents and the different percentages of what those go to pay for. So the first penny, 50% of that goes towards flood control, 10% towards tax relief, 15% towards economic development, and 25% for community improvements. And then on the other penny, that is split between NAWS, tax relief, flood control funding, and some more infrastructure funding. So between property tax and sales tax, we have probably close to 25% of our revenues are accounted for from these two streams. And one of the things that we're also seeing from year to year is we're becoming less dependent on property tax and more dependent on sales tax. More of our equipment purchases and projects and those kinds of things are being paid for with sales tax, whereas property tax is primarily going towards staff, with a significant portion of that going towards public safety. I think a couple of council meetings ago, we presented information that showed that about 80% of our property tax revenue goes towards supporting our police and fire department. As part of preparing the budget this year, we also looked at some changes to fees aside from property tax and sales tax. So one of the big ones being, after conversation with council, is the creation of a fee to help pay for maintenance of all the flood infrastructure that we're building, to make sure that they're properly maintained and that they function when needed. And so we are proposing a residential fee of $2 a month and a commercial fee of $4 a month for property owners and utility users throughout the city limits to help cover some of that. I'll have some other slides here that talk about that a little bit more because it is a hybrid approach, but that is a new fee. We're also proposing, we currently do not charge any fees for fire inspections. Many communities throughout the state and throughout the country have a fee for fire inspections, so we are proposing a fire inspection fee. which would include various different things throughout there, as outlined in that table. Back to the flood control maintenance fee, council discussed a hybrid fee with a portion of that coming out of a fee that's on the utility fees. That's a $2 and $4 that I just talked about on the previous slide. And then the other half or portion of it being paid for out of either property tax increase or sales tax increase. Currently, after deliberation with staff and the city finance director, the current budget is built off of the revenues from the utility fee and the remainder being paid out of sales tax. This budget is not built off of any increase on property tax for flood control maintenance. Those funding would go towards, that new revenue would go towards some of the infrastructure costs and building some reserve for future infrastructure needs, as well as funding some new positions for helping maintain this infrastructure and this land, which would include 3 heavy equipment operators, 1 light equipment operator in those departments, and those will be outlined in future slides when I talk about new positions added into the budget this year. The new fire inspection fees that we have built in the budget are projected to create almost $57,000 of new revenue. Some additional fees here, as we are looking at some slight increases with regards to garbage collection, 50 cents on a 65-gallon cart and $1 on 95-gallon carts. And then the council previously approved some changes to some of the landfill fees. So an additional $50 for anyone bringing asbestos material to the landfill, an additional $60 for any contaminated soils, and then single stream recycling. So any carrier bringing recycling material to the landfill would pay a $175 fee. Some additional changes with regards to the airport on some of the ARF fees and landing fees and those kinds of things. Some slight changes there. But we also had some fees that were recommended to be eliminated at the airport as well. And those are outlined here on this slide. So some of the highlights for 2024 of what's in the budget. First, I want to talk about some of the challenges. Like many businesses and citizens throughout the community, we've experienced inflationary pressures. Costs of materials and parts and services and all those kinds of things that have increased significantly over the last 12 to 24 months. We also have gotten tighter in our spending, so we've been spending a lot of the money that the council has given to us. And as that's gotten tighter, there's been less savings to roll over from budget year to budget year. And we also made it a priority to preserve the progress that we've made on allocating funding towards our street maintenance program, which I'll talk about a little bit more about that in the future. Another significant priority and commitment this year was doing some wage adjustments for staff to keep those market competitive. So there's about a $2.5 million additional costs and expenditure on employee wages alone. That's a combination of the normal wages that employees qualify for on an annual basis, $1.5 million in market adjustments to make sure that we're paying fair wages and we aren't losing employees to other agencies because they can make more money at those agencies, as well as some money for the typical anniversary and career ladders. I would note that of this 2.5 million, almost 1.3 million is for police and fire and their staff to keep their wages competitive with other agencies throughout the state and the region. Back to the topic of street maintenance. Last year, we budgeted $8 million in our budget for making preventative maintenance on streets and repairs. We've kept that level in the 2024 budget, but do want to note that the city engineer's current estimate to get to where we need to be, we need to budget about $12 million a year. and that is not being met in this budget. We're just trying to not lose more ground and keep our funding steady. Again, just a reminder that we're dipping more into reserves. At previous council meeting, the council gave authorization to staff to use $3 million out of reserves to help balance the budget this year, which we are using all $3 million of that. And that $3 million is primarily going towards maintaining the $8 million funding for street maintenance, maintaining 5 police officers within the budget, and setting aside some money for the old City Hall renovation for the police department. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide. Well, actually, I'll talk about it now. So with the budget, we've been able to reserve approximately $1.5 million for the costs of whatever the council and community decides to do with the police administration building, whether that's staying in the old City Hall or a new location or whatever. We anticipate doing some conversation and some public outreach and input from the council and the public in October for that. So look for more information coming forward on that. And we'll give some budget estimates and those kinds of things. But as of right now, the 2024 budget proposes setting aside $1.5 million towards those future costs. With regards to employee retention, council directed staff to retain current employees by adopting the full pay plan. And in order to help balance the budget, we were very limited on any new employee requests and only approved those that were mission essential or a part of an enterprise fund, which means it's not a burden on the property taxes of the citizens. So just a reminder again with regards to the Magic City aspirations that staff is used to try and help make these difficult budgeting decisions and keep moving forward progressively. Some highlights of things that were included in the budget. We had a total of 10 new full-time employees in the 2024 budget. Here's a breakdown of those. One position is a new school resource officer for the new second Minot High School, North High School. 75% of that is paid for by the public school district and 25% by the city of Minot. There's an upgrade of an administrative clerk position in the police department. So the cost difference there is going from part-time to full-time, including the benefits associated with that position. We're also recommending the creation of a fleet manager position. Currently, those duties are shared with our transit system operator and our fleet manager. With the coming on of the MPO and how that funding structure is going to change a little bit with regards to transit. And in addition to wanting to begin creating a vehicle equipment replacement fund and program, we felt it important to make the investment in a fleet manager so that hopefully we can gain more efficiencies with regards to the maintenance and the replacement of all city vehicles across the organization in the future. Having a fleet manager that is an expert in that area, we felt was necessary to add even in these difficult budget times. I would note that those are both starred, which indicates that those are funded through the general fund, so those would be funded primarily out of property tax. Those 3 positions are the only ones that would affect property tax. Airport security specialist is also proposed that it would be paid for out of the enterprise fund of the airport. And then there are the 3 heavy equipment operators and the light equipment operators that were proposed earlier as part of the flood mitigation maintenance program. And those would be paid for out of the revenues generated by the utility fee and sales tax funds. And then there are 2 utility operator positions that are proposed to be added, and those would be paid for out of the water and sewer funds, out of those enterprise funds. Also note on the right-hand side of this presentation are all the positions that were requested that were not built into the budget. Primarily being police and fire positions, and then 1 building and grounds maintenance for facilities maintenance were not budgeted in this budget. Another item included in the budget would be beginning to transition from a vacation sick leave program to a PTO program. The financial impact of that is almost $230,000 to provide short-term disability policy to employees to be the safety net for the PTO system going forward. Also in here is the community contributions that have been discussed at previous city council meetings. The direction of the council at the last meeting was to keep the funding for 2024 the same as 2023. Here, the far left column is the 2023 budget. The second to the left is what was requested by the different entities this year. And then council directed staff to go out and revisit with them and ask them to reduce their funding requests. So that's the third column. And then the far right column is what is proposed in the 2024 budget. Overall, and this, the Minot Area Chamber EDC and the Suarez Basin Planning Council, you'll see the notes there. Those are paid for out of the sales tax economic development portion. If you recall on the slide that showed the breakdown of the sales tax, there was 15% of the first penny that goes towards economic development. The funding for the MACDC and Suarez Basin Planning Council is paid for out of that 15% of that first penny. But the overall commitment of the city towards these organizations is just a little over $500,000 a year. So what's the impact on property tax? Currently in the preliminary budget, we are proposing just a very slight increase on the property tax mill levy, going from a 0.12008 to a 0.12071 increase, which is about 0.0063 per $100,000 of evaluation of a home, assessed value. That would represent $2.84 increase over the year. So if you have a home that's $300,000, you would triple that. So it'd be just under $9 a year in increase in property tax for a property owner. I wanted to show a little bit of the history of property tax with regards to the mill rate and collections over the last several years. You'll see that in 2017 to 2019, there was a huge increase. But since that time frame, it actually decreased from 2019 to 2020 and has remained fairly flat since that time period. So I think the council and the staff have done a good job of trying to hold the line on property taxes and not try to balance the budget off of the pockets of citizens. A majority of the increase that you'll see there as far as collections, again, is tied to the increase in assessed values. So either new construction or given the market demand right now in the community, that property values are going up. People are selling their commercial and residential properties for much more than they bought them for previously. Again, just a recap on the mill levy. We're proposing 120.71 mills that would generate about 28.7 million. If you want to know what the potential revenue is per mill, it's outlined there at just under $238,000 per mill. And in fact, the 0.63 mill levy increase we're proposing only generates approximately another $150,000 in property tax revenue. So if the council wanted to keep the mill levy flat to what it was last year, you would need to find $150,000 in spending cuts to be able to do that. If you wanted to, I'll go here to this slide. Again, we're becoming more dependent on sales tax as we move away from property tax. The overall additional revenue based off of assessed value and the mill levy proposed increase is about $1.5 million. So if you wanted to leave it completely flat, even from an actual dollar amount collected, the council would need to cut $1.5 million out of the budget from what's proposed here in my recommended budget. So what didn't make the cut? What did we not include in the budget? We did not include $1 million for the implementation of the CP Rail Quiet Zone. We did not include $560,000 for a library remodel project. And we cut $488,000 in capital equipment. This would be primarily city vehicles, equipment, those kinds of things that were left out of the budget. This was all done in collaboration with the management team and the department heads, with many of them making recommendations of things that could be done without. Why I say that those could be done without, a lot of those are still needs being left off the table. These are not wants. These are needs of things that need to be replaced that are not included. With that, I will state that there are still 5 patrol vehicles in the police department that are included to be replaced, an animal control vehicle, and I believe an investigations vehicle for the PD. But outside of replacement of some of the PD vehicles, no other general fund supported departments are having any vehicles replaced in the 2024 budget. Again, just overall summary here, we also made some cuts in personnel costs, some cuts in operational costs, and cuts in other capital expenditures throughout, all representing about $8.8 million in cuts that city staff have made to help balance the budget for the 2024 year. Final impacts, again, we're proposing a 0.63 mil increase. Overall additional revenue of 1.5 million. Bulk of that coming from the increased assessed values across the city. Again, just a caution here that the city is becoming more reliant on sales tax. And all new requests, staff felt, were helping achieve the council's aspirations as outlined in our previous conversations. With that, I'm going to finish with some future considerations here. We have some challenges already in the 2025 budget that we're looking forward to and trying to be prepared for. A lot of the 2024 budget is being funded with the remaining ARPA funds. These were COVID funds given to us. Pretty much all of that ARPA funding is going towards the Puppy Dog Coulee stormwater improvement. I believe it was $17 million, if I remember right. And ARPA funds going towards that project, but the Puppy Dog Coulee is significantly more than that $17 million. We continue to try to maintain infrastructure needs in streets, lead-based pipes, flood control, NAWS, all those types of things and commitments that we have going forward. We will still have in 2025. We touched on a little bit with the police department administrative building needs. We still have future inflationary pressures, and rising interest rates will make borrowing for large projects more costly. It's kind of a catch-22. Staff has done a good job, particularly in the finance department, of capitalizing on high interest rates to gain more interest revenues off of our reserves and those kinds of things. But at the same time, when we go out and we're planning on doing bonding for a lot of our flood control projects, and we're going to have to pay more in interest rates on those going forward. There was another note. We also have some airport bond payments that we still have about 13 years on, and we've been using some of the COVID funding to help make those payments. But starting in 2025, that pressure comes fully on all of the other revenues of the city, and we no longer have that COVID funding available to help us make those payments in the future. I'd also make a note on the PTO that we budgeted the money in for the short-term disability. We did not budget any additional funds with regards to PTO buyback. So and I outlined this in the memo, as part of the council packet, there's going to be some need for management and supervisors to manage that and try to keep that buyback money within the confines of any savings that we have from open vacant positions on an annual basis, so that we can keep that within budget. Management staff believes that's doable, but it will take some management and oversight from the management team and our supervisors to be able to do that. Some other future considerations for potential additional revenue in the future would encourage the the city council to consider implementation of a sales tax, public safety tax. Our current rate right now is 2%. State law allows us to go up to 3%. Each penny generates approximately $11.5 million. I think this is a conversation we need to have in the future, because if we're going to have any success in balancing the 2025 budget and beyond without reducing services and cutting staff positions, that public safety tax is going to need to be in place to help cover some of our public safety personnel costs, equipment replacement costs, and facility costs in the future to provide some relief off of property tax. I want to remind the council and the community that we still have many ongoing expensive commitments, including NAWS. We anticipate that with the inflationary costs and pressures, we had hoped to meet our local match, our 35% with regards to NAWS in the 2023-2024 years. But given the cost of projects increasing, that is now looking like 2027 or 2028 before we meet that 35% commitment. We still have future flood control needs, and we're going to need to bond or use revolving loan funds from the state to help do that. And in consultation with Dave Lakefield, our finance director, we're also going to have a point here in the middle where our cash reserves are going to run out to be able to do that. And we won't have any money in the bank to make those flood control commitments. And so we may need to do some interim financing to help meet that need. Again, a lot of that's driven by a lot of our inflationary costs, that projects are more expensive than what we built the estimates off of over 10 years ago when we started these projects. And then again, the future building needs for the police department, whether we leave that at the current facility or look at other alternatives, there's going to be a significant financial commitment of the community moving forward with that facility. I want to touch base on future steps of the budget process, on what council's involvement is, but more importantly, what the opportunity is for the public and to be involved in providing their input with regards to finalizing the 2024 budget. So August 21st will be the Q&A session for the council to ask any questions with regards to the proposed preliminary budget. And then on September 1st, the council president, Alderman Pittner, will present his recommended budget to city council and the staff. There will be a public hearing scheduled on September 18th for all the public to provide any input of changes to the budget that they would like to see happen. And then the council needs to wrap up their official approval by October 2nd and adopt the final budget so we can get it submitted to the state and comply with state laws. With that, I will open it up for questions of the council on anything with regards to the city manager proposed budget. There is a printed copy available for the council, and it's also available on the city website. So if the public would like to view that, that is available on the city website currently as well.
Thank you for the presentation, Harold. I will open it up for any questions from the council. Comments? Steve.
I wanted to thank you too, Harold, for a clear, if somber presentation. I was going to say grim. It's not quite that bad, but certainly somber. Two items I was concerned about. One was the delaying or perhaps elimination of the quiet zone. You said that we wouldn't be able to fund it for 2024. Are we still going to be at least funding the engineering for that?
Yes.
So we will fund engineering in 2024.
We'll continue moving forward with design, but we will not have any money available for construction.
Okay. And the second question was in terms of the new fire station. I noticed that you're proposing not hiring a fire captain and several firefighters. Would that affect the operations of the new station?
It won't. The fire captain was some of the changes and reorganization that Chief Kelly wanted to make, mainly being a training captain and overseeing training that's currently spread out and absorbed over the other captains. And Chief Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong. And then the three positions I think were proposed by Chief Kelly at my request due to the fact that we're seeing increased times that we have more than one call at a time. I think their most recent number was about 30% of the time we have more than one call, which requires resources. And if we were to have a fully involved incident, we'd have to use all personnel on duty and all equipment out of all the fire stations to respond to that, which would leave nothing left to respond to those second calls that are now happening about 30% of the time. So I was encouraging her to look at it, continuing to increase the staffing levels to meet NFPA standards and to have more staff on duty so that we could respond to more calls than just one at a time.
And the way we're managing that or coping with that is to call up our reserve force at that point when we have an active situation going on.
Reserve force or mutual aid agreements
Yeah.
that we would have in place, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments? Any other questions of Harold? Paul?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just make the comments. Again, thank you to staff, Harold, and department heads on going through this. I had the privilege, whether they wanted me there or not, to sit in on some of those department head meetings and be a part of the process, which is very enlightening. And again, it's a testament to all the work that everybody puts into it. And I think the slide that, the one right before this, is probably the most important for the public. This is how you get engaged with your city government. This is how, these are the meetings you come to. This is the time to be involved. So again, I'd like to see the dais full. I'd like to see plenty of questions and comments between now and all of these dates. So again, thank you to staff and everybody putting in all the hard work.
Thank you, Paul. And yeah, I'll echo those comments on, early on, we had that, I think it was initially a $6 million, and then whittled down to 4. And I think the sharpened pencils, you sharpened them really well, and then we're down to something that, it can't go above that. We can always go lower, but it can't go above the proposed there. So kudos to Harold and the management team on that one.
Mr. Mayor?
Lisa?
So for clarification for anyone watching or when people go to the mail and open up their mail, I think they're going to get this estimated budget, correct? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, assuming the council approves this as the preliminary budget, this would be submitted to the county, and then that preliminary budget number would go out in a mailing to all citizens, and that would include any proposed increases from the school district, the county, and the city all collectively, so they can see that. And in accordance with the new state law changes, that would include both the mill levy as a rate number, but also the dollar amount that represents, which we've always provided anyway. But that's all there, and you'll see through the presentation that we provided the information both in a mill levy calculation as well as a dollar amount calculation, so everyone can see that and look at that. But yes, there will be a letter coming out, is it late August, early September, that everyone gets, so they can see that and understand what the impact would be to their property specifically.
Thank you.
So I guess at this time, Steve?
Speaking of seeing things, I think what I would ask you for the August 21st meeting to do is to prepare a list of what the budgets are for the other governmental agencies, the school board, the park district, and the county, and what percentage of change, if any, there is. I think it's important that the public know we've really done a decent job of tightening our belts, and I want them to be able to compare what we've done with what the other taxing and governing entities have also done. The individual statements, I don't think, give us an overall picture. They help us with an individual piece of property. But I think it's important the public know the overall budget figures and what change there has been, if any.
Thank you. Good point, Steve. Anything else? I guess this is the time that I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
By Lisa, second by Paul. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Quadrigula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Burlingame?
Yes.
Evans? Janser?
Yes.
Motion has carried. We will move on to item number 8, which is personal appearances. Now is the time. If you wish to address anything to the council, now is your opportunity to step forward to the podium. If there is, okay.
Mayor Ross, council members. Denise Lundbo, I reside at 806 Fifth Street Northwest. Concerning the Trinity Guest House. After the meeting a couple weeks ago, I had sent an email to all the council members with some concerns as far as the downtown business owner, as far as the halfway house being put into the Trinity Guest House. Unfortunately, I did not get any response from any of the council members. But with the halfway house possibly going into the guest house, there are several bars that are within walking distance of the guest house. In my opinion, that would not be a good location for a halfway house or a possible men's homeless shelter. It would, to me, be detrimental to put it in a location like that, especially when there's no place for children. If this is going to be a facility for women or for families, women with families, to have children there. You're right half a block away from one of the busiest streets in Minot. Also, we've been spending all this money, all this time to improve downtown, to make it a great location for people to go to shop, to walk the streets, just to enjoy downtown. It's just, to me, not a very good, as a 30-year business owner downtown, I would respect, hopefully that you respect the opinions of the people that spoke at the last meeting, my opinion, members of the Downtown Association, concerning this project. I know it's been put through with no discussion tonight. In my opinion, hopefully we should have had discussion, but that's all. If you have any questions. Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Lisa.
If I could respond to Ms. Limbo. I think maybe you watched the meeting the last time and certainly did receive your email. And it's a balance. I mean, I can't speak for everyone else. I know when I was posed with that question, it really is a balance of where is the best location for this type of facility and what is the need. We hear a lot of times that people don't want it near them. And I understand that. I understand the fears. Typically, the fears have been waylaid when a facility like this has gone in. There's been concerns in the beginning, and the concerns have kind of dissipated very quickly. But we also know what a huge, huge need we have in our community for people that are suffering from addictions. I didn't make the comment 2 weeks ago, and I kind of regretted it because when I got up the next morning, I learned of another young woman, a young mother that I knew personally that died of an overdose. So with her passing, I personally know 10 people in their 20s who have passed away from overdoses. And so I think of them when I make those votes as well too. We need to provide services for them. And this is a location that, based on some of the testimony that we heard 2 weeks ago, is probably a safer location than when we had the emergency room sitting there. So I can only, again, speak for myself, but that is what led me to make the decision to approve the zone change, is what, essentially what we were doing that evening. But it was, I had to weigh a little bit heavier on the need for people that are suffering from addictions.
Paul.
I more so have a question for the city attorney. I've always been under the impression that we are not to reply to emails, is to not discuss city business out of an open meeting. Am I misunderstanding that?
Alderman Pittner and members of the council, you're welcome to respond to emails. The concern is that if the person that is sending you an email should be using that to build a consensus amongst the council, that would lead to a likely open meetings violation. So our recommendation has always been that you can respond, but that can't be used to build a consensus for what's going to happen at the next meeting. And in regard to this particular item, if I may, the decision before the council is whether or not to approve the zone change. So whether or not it's appropriate to change the zone to the CBD district, I believe, is what this particular instance was. It's not so much to approve the exact use that's going in there at that particular time. So I just wanted to put that on the record for the council's benefit.
Paul?
Just to continue, thank you, Mayor. That would be my next point, is that it wasn't in front of us to approve or deny the use. It was the rezone. They could have said they were opening an ice cream shop and 2 months later switched it to what they're going to do now, and we would have absolutely no control, to my understanding. And that was, to me, it was a lawsuit waiting to happen had we denied this item, because we were moving the goalpost at the finish line for the applicant. So in some ways, I feel our hands were tied, because they followed every rule that we had in place. If we want to change the rules at this point going forward and have a different standard, I encourage you to be a part of that, and for anyone in the future to be a part of that. I'd love to be a part of it. If we deem these as having more, Alderman Padragula said it, having more clarification. What is a hospital? Is it a recovery house? Is it an emergency room? Is it somewhere that has overnight beds, a medical staff? And again, I think staff will give that to us, and going forward, that we'll make sure that there's more clear and concise information and practices going forward. As far as us not having discussion tonight, I agree. If you wanted it to be pulled, we could have come to any one of us and asked us to pull it. We would have been more than happy to do that. I don't want there to be an impression that we were forcing something through. There was an ample opportunity to have discussion at the last meeting, at the public hearing, and it could have been pulled tonight. All of us were a part of that discussion last. We didn't feel it to be needed, and I don't mean that in any disrespect. But if there's anything going forward, any person from the public that wants us to pull an item so that they have an opportunity to speak to it, we're always have been more than welcome to do that. But going forward, if there's changes to be made, then I welcome those changes, or at the very least that discussion. So just want to make sure that's on the record as well.
Thank you, Paul. Anything further from the council? Steve?
Yeah, I think I'm the only person here on the council who's worked in inpatient mental health and chemical dependency treatment facilities and worked with outpatient residential treatment facilities. And my experience and my reading of the literature is that the risk to the community from those kinds of facilities is really pretty minimal. And when I compared that to the risks of an hospital emergency room where people with gunshot wounds are brought in, where people who've been involved in fights on different sides are brought in, I think there's a much higher risk of some sort of violence or inappropriate behavior. As I said before, when I'm in the emergency room, I often see sheriff's deputies bringing in prisoners from the county jail, or I see police officers bringing in people who are about to be arrested or have been arrested and have medical needs. I think in that environment, there's significantly more risk to the public and the neighborhood. Obviously, if it's managed poorly, there could be problems. But again, we're not in the position of overseeing those. That would be the relevant state health department or the licensing boards that govern those facilities, or the malpractice insurance carriers that they use. But again, my experience has been that facilities like that really, the people in them are really no different. If anything, they're probably less of a risk in terms of inappropriate behavior because they are in a supervised environment. And when it comes to women who are pregnant, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine a more vulnerable and less likely to offend or less likely to act out population. I've worked in a home for unwed mothers. That's not what you worry about. So, if you had to choose a population that is in need of services, I think that's the one you probably choose the most, because they're not going to do anything. I mean, if you're heavily pregnant, you don't feel like getting up out of bed sometimes. And, the idea that something would happen, I think is pretty slim. Do I think it's a good location? No. Would I have put it there? No. But I'm not running the program. And I think, as Paul said, our jurisdiction ends basically with uses of property. It's not the particular program or how it's run. But I personally would not see any major risk. It'd be nice if they had a place where their kids could frolic and play, but that's their issue, that's their problem. But I think a supervised, well-controlled, well-run facility really poses minimal risk. And certainly is something, as Lisa said, is something we need more of in the community. I very much agree with Paul that we really need to be much clearer about what those definitions of different facilities are, hospital versus clinic versus residential treatment versus this versus that. That's not clear enough, and it needs to be clarified. And I want the planning staff to come to us with some greater clarification, and to the planning commission. But I think, we're stuck too, that, as Paul said, if we change the rules in the middle of the game, we subject ourselves to legal liability. And to me, it's really important we have a full range of facilities available for people with various needs. And that seems as good or as bad a place as any. I guess for me, one of the issues was that it was already across the street from an established healthcare facility. Just a few blocks on the other side, there's an outpatient addiction treatment program, or used to be, I think still is, at the old St. Joseph's complex, just 2 blocks away. So those kinds of facilities have already been in the neighborhood. Yeah, I'm concerned. I don't want to see people engaged in inappropriate behaviors on the streets, but I think if anything, this kind of a facility will decrease the likelihood of that happening. That's my professional opinion.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Denise.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Last call for anybody who wishes to address the council. If not, we will move on to item number 9, that is miscellaneous and discussion items. Is there anything that the council members have? If not, we can move on to item number 10 on the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion by Paul.
Paul.
Second?
You. Second by Mark Janser. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned.